Last week we shared with you a glimpse of Brian Koberger's defense that was based on court filings. This week we're going to refute those items and a whole lot more as we wait for the coming trial. This and more on this episode of Charlie Crimebuster. Yep, it's what some people are calling the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this podcast are solely those of the individuals interviewed and participating in this show, and do not represent those of Charlie Crimebuster or Peacemaker Network. All individuals described or mentioned in the podcast should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This podcast contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions, which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Hello and welcome to the podcast today, and look into the future based on what the defense is saying in their filings concerning Koberger. And the news reports that we have today, well, we can pretty well get a good idea what the defense is going to use in the coming murder trial of Brian Koberger. He is now charged of 4 counts of murder and felony break-in regarding the Idaho student killings. But now it's time to do what I love doing at the beginning of every podcast. That is to welcome all of our new listeners. We appreciate you joining us on the Charlie Crime Train Express. Every week we have more and more, and we are appreciative of every one of you. Please take time to what we call reach out with a shout out. You can reach me, Charlie Crimebuster, at gmail.com. That is Charlie Crimebuster at gmail.com. There you can make suggestions, ask questions, even make objections. Yep, it's a safe place. Again, go to charliecrimebuster at gmail.com. And if you'd like to support the program, we're going over there to peacemakernetwork.com. Peacemakernetwork.com. There you can become a badge, BADGE supporter for as little as $3 a month. Hey, you'll not only be part of supporting the program, but you will help us help those who run into danger rather than away from danger. Again, that's peacemakernetwork.com. You will be helping us help law enforcement, first responders, and the military. peacemakernetwork.com. Now, we're going to have all of those in the show notes that you can just link on, so you don't have to write all that down or even try to remember it. But before we get into our program today, let me take just a moment to share with you our Crazy Crook Story of the Week. You see, every week we share a Crazy Crook story. Kind of helps us counter the dark things we often share about with these horrible crimes we report on. And these would-be abductors, well, they allegedly lured a 19-year-old victim to a street, 72nd Street actually, in Bensonhurst, around 10 p.m. on a Wednesday night. They lured him there after agreeing to buy his car on Facebook Marketplace. That's what police said. Hey, my friend, be careful responding to online ads. They could be a trap, because here is what happened to this guy. But hopefully, if you ever are abducted, and I hope you're not, but if you ever are abducted, hopefully they'll be as crazy as these crooks were. You see, when he arrived, well, 6 big guys allegedly pushed him into a vehicle. One of them flashed what was a fake gun, though he did not know that. Then they blindfolded him, demanded $10,000 from his cousin over the phone for his safe return. But all this quick-thinking cousin, you see, he traced the victim's phone to an area as the kidnappers moved easterly, and it began to ping at Floyd Bennett Field. Now, Floyd Bennett Field is not just any field. It just happens to be near an NYPD training facility and is often crawling with cops. Well, my friend, officers from the 62nd and 63rd precincts, along with the City Parks Department, well, they all rushed. They all rushed to the area. And, yep, the alleged kidnappers were nabbed, arrested, at 11:50 p.m. That's in less than 2 hours. 6 men in custody Thursday afternoon with charges pending. That's according to the NYPD. By the way, the victim reported a minor stomach injury. Well, my friend best if you're trying to get away from the popo, well, you probably ought to plan your getaway spot some other spot than right next to a police training facility, don't you think? And so, my friend, these crazy crooks are indeed Charlie Crimebuster's crazy crooks of the week. Now back to our main focus. In the early hours of November the 13th, 2022, 4 University of Idaho students were fatally stabbed in an off-campus residence. That's there in Moscow, Idaho. And on December the 30th, 28-year-old Brian Christopher Koberger, he was arrested in Monroe County, Pennsylvania. Arrested on 4 counts of first-degree murder, 1 count felony burglary. And Koberger's trial, it's currently set for October of 2023. And yes, prosecutors are seeking the death penalty. And just as I stated last week, these defense lawyers, they're not lying down. They will not give up without a fight to the finish. And my friend, they have come into the ring swinging for knockout punches. They will, no doubt in my mind, follow the example of 2 high-profile cases in attacking the prosecution. That, of course, the O.J. Simpson case and the Casey Anthony case. Both are classics in teaching defense lawyers how to attack the prosecution. They each attack the prosecution's evidence with an onslaught of doubt. Now, I believe, based on what we've read and seen so far, we'll see exactly that happen in this case as well. Now, the suspect, Brian Koberger, he has been assigned a county public defender. Ann Taylor is her name. She's been working with the county for the last 19 years, and she has been given the top job in the public defender's office. That was back in 2017, according to the Daily Mail. Now, the 57-year-old attorney, previously worked on a high-profile case. It was a case of Jonathan Ellington. He was accused of running his car over a woman. Now, while he was initially sentenced to 25 years imprisonment, this lady, this attorney, helped to overturn the case after she established false testimony that had been given by an Idaho police officer. Now, her appointment came just as Koberger was arrested. He had a different public defender, Jason Labar, there in that other jurisdiction, and he said that the accused could not afford a private attorney, therefore would receive a public defender. Now, interesting enough, she got right on the case right after she was appointed. A person resembling Miss Taylor, she was spotted among a whole group of people visiting the site of the murders, and they reported that this person spent about 5 hours around the house before leaving. Now, the group did decline to identify themselves to the media, but no doubt about it, it was this attorney and her team already on the case. So it does appear that Brian Koberger now has an attorney who's not afraid to start the attack. We now know that because our team, they filed a motion getting the indictment dismissed. As I said, we can look at the defense's tactics by just following the motions. In the filing, the attorneys, they argued that the grand jury was misled as to the standard of proof required for an indictment. They said the grand jury should have been informed that the standard of proof required for an indictment was way beyond a reasonable doubt. However, they argue that the grand jury instead was erroneously instructed that the standard of proof just required for a presentment, just a presentment, which they say would mean having a reasonable ground for believing the defendant had committed an alleged offense. The filing went on to say that the failure to properly instruct a grand jury as a standard of proof, that is grounds for a dismissal of the indictment. Now, if the judge refused to dismiss the indictment, well, the defense team, they've asked for a new preliminary hearing to determine whether the case should move forward. Now, in this session, I shared with you that we would be refuting the moves of the defense. Well, this one's quite easy. Even if they were to prevail with this information, and we know that they're just throwing up stuff on the wall to see what will stick, well, even if they prevailed, this is a no-brainer. The prosecution would simply then indict him with a preliminary hearing. And remember, in a prelim, well, the prosecution only has to show PC, probable cause, that says there is a probable chance that he did it. They do not have the same burden that the trial will have, which is on proving it beyond a reasonable doubt. So, my friend, while this tactic could work for a win for the defense, it's just simply a punch thrown. It is not a knockout. Not even really serious points on the board for the defense. Now, the next attack will, of course, come to be the cell phone data, the cameras that caught the suspect in the vicinity of the murders at the time of the murders. Now, this particular one has got a lot of press. It is simply called the alibi defense. Now, according to the alibi filed in court, well, Koberger, they said he was just out for a routine drive on the night of the killing, which he has a habit of doing. They went on to say, quote, Mr. Koberger has a long habit of going on drives alone. That's what the document read. Often he would go for drives at night. He did so late on November the 12th and into November the 13th, 2022. You see, Koberger also is not claiming to be at a specific location at a specific time because, well, there's not a specific witness who can say exactly where he was hour by hour during that time. They went on to say that Mr. Koberger was out driving alone. Collaborating evidence may come from the cross-examination of the state's witnesses. That's what they reported. They said it may come from a presentation of defense experts. Mr. Koberger is aware and will comply of his continuing duty to disclose information. Now, they also said that the defense asked the court to exempt Koberger from further questioning at the time, saying that he is prepared to provide further detail in an ex parte hearing with the court. That's a one-party discussion. Now, in a moment, I'm going to tell you about what I believe is the very most serious attack on the prosecution. And it is attack on the DNA, which is often called the Holy Grail in trials today. But before that, in the past several podcasts, during what some people would call commercial breaks, well, we've been giving you information on missing persons. Keep it in mind that each missing person is someone's son, someone's daughter, someone's wife, someone's husband, someone's father, someone's mother. But in these short breaks, we hope that vital information has been passed. Now, last week, James shared with you what to do if a loved one goes missing. Again, news we hope you will never have to use. But this week, our missing person is perhaps the most difficult type of person to find. You see, it's one thing to go missing from the United States. It's quite another thing to go missing from a different country. Now, this information is also on spot because, believe it or not, we do have a number of listeners from that part of the world where this missing person went missing from. Yes, we do have quite a large digital footprint, not just in the United States, but in particular parts of the world, and particularly this part of the world. So here is our producer, James Buckland, with news you can use regarding missing persons.
Thank you, Charlie Crimebuster. The United States federal government, namely the FBI, is known to offer money for missing or the disappearance of individuals. This past May marked the 9th anniversary of the disappearance of Paul Edwin Overbeat Jr. from Afghanistan. In mid-May of 2014, Paul Edwin Overby Jr., an American writer, disappeared in Khost Province, Afghanistan, where he was conducting research on a self-authored book. Prior to his disappearance, Overby suggested that he planned to cross the border into Pakistan in furtherance of his research. So in May of 2018, the FBI Washington Field Office announced a reward of up to $5 million. That's right, $5 million for the information leading directly to the safe location, recovery, and return of Paul Edwin Overby Jr. And to this day, the reward remains unclaimed. You see, the FBI is dedicated to locating American citizens overseas and returning them home to their families. And Overby is one of 3 Americans that have gone missing in Afghanistan, including Mark Frerichs and Sidney Mazel. In addition, the United States Department of State's Rewards for Justice program is offering a reward of up to $5 million. That's right, $5 million for information leading to the location, recovery, and return of Paul Overby. So we encourage anyone with information concerning the kidnapping of Paul Edwin Overby Jr. to contact the FBI, the nearest American embassy, or the consulate. Or you can even submit a tip to tips.fbi.gov. That's tips.fbi.gov. Tips can be kept strictly confidential.
Thank you, James, for that useful information. Again, that's tips.fbi.gov. Now back to the focus where the defense can do the most damage, I believe, to the prosecution's case. That is, of course, an attack on the DNA. Last week, I did share with you how Koberger's defense team will attack the evidence by actually talking about the DNA. And now we know that prosecutors claim that Koberger's DNA, well, they're claiming that it is a statistical match to the DNA found on the knife sheath that was found at the scene of the murders. But Koberger's defense team, they've claimed that no DNA evidence from any of the 4 victims has been detected at the suspect's home, his work, or his vehicle. They went on to say you would expect a lot more DNA than a single source at such a gruesome crime scene. The defense will argue that the testing is inaccurate, or the DNA was transferred, and that the DNA of 3 other men was present at the house. Now we know that they are also challenging the evidence that the investigators have used. Now they're using flaws in the reliability of the genealogy, which investigators used to arrest him. You see, investigators used genetic genealogy to link Koberger to the crime. Now get this, by creating a DNA profile from that knife sheath that was found at the scene. They say that matched the profile of Koberger's dad, which then eventually led to his arrest. But recent court documents by Koberger's defense, they dispute the imperfect nature of the science used to identify him. They're scrutinizing, a pivotal piece of the evidence that connects him to the murders, suggesting that DNA link may not be trustworthy. You see, this is a much more aggressive challenge, where they're saying, wait a minute, is this the fruit of the poison apple? Or something? And how did you get the genealogical match? Do we know that it's a good match? That's what Greg Hamlin said, who's a forensic biologist at Boise State University. Just maybe the investigators got tunnel vision early on in the case through bad genealogy. Now the defense attorneys, they submitted an affidavit from Dr. Lee Larkin, who is a DNA expert based in California, and he echoed concerns that the science behind genetic genealogy, it's not flawless. Now, Larkin argues that DNA profiles built by at-home test companies, such as Ancestry DNA and 23andMe, they aren't constructed the same way as those by specialized laboratories, and they are not as reliable. That was according to her affidavit that has been seen by reporters. You see, a poor quality kit may have too few matches, or it just might have a phantom match that are not real measures of relationship. That's what the document states. You see, law enforcement now is increasingly utilizing this technique to track suspects, their relatives on ancestry websites. Now, online police database, these websites, well, unlike the police database, I should say, they offer a much broader array of relatives for investigation. Now, Larkin went ahead and he gave an example of nearly 20 possible relationship lines that were listed for a match and said that was considered a close match. She also noted cases that she's aware of where genetic genealogy has been wrong, and cases where databases were improperly used by authorities. Now, Hamilton, who spearheaded an Idaho Innocent Project, she emphasizes that DNA can unveil a lot, but it doesn't always suit the entire narrative. She goes on to say, our experience when we worked with the police was that the first hit they got through genealogy, the guy that they thought was a good suspect, he had been in the area, he sounded like a good match, they went to test him because his father had a close match, and get this, it turned out the suspect was wrong. So, the crucial question remains, will the defense's claim impact Koberger's plea? Will it have anything to do with turning this prosecution around? Well, now, I want to refute this claim from the prosecutors. You see, I believe, my friend, that despite what the defense will argue, you're going to find that prosecutors will show that DNA was collected by professionals who are well aware of how crucial it is to get this right. You see, this very small police department, well, they did what many, even large police departments are not willing to do. They swallowed their pride. They sought help from the best of the best to bring the most professional investigators to the team. They did not care about who got the glory for the investigation. They cared about getting it right. They were not territorial in their approach, and they leaned on the very best in scientific discovery in collecting and using the evidence. And I believe the jury will see that in the presentation of the prosecution, particularly in the use of DNA. Now, my friend, while DNA was relatively new in the O.J. Simpson case, and it was not as refined in the Casey Anthony case, well, prosecutors today have gotten a whole lot better in explaining how DNA works so that the average juror can now understand it. And while the defense will make much ado over DNA, particularly the genetics research, I believe the prosecution will prevail, and this will be called, what I call, the smoking gun for the prosecution. I believe DNA will actually nail it shut for the prosecution. Now, the next part about the defense that I did not mention last week, it was actually brought out to me from a loyal fan of Charlie Crimebuster. Thank you, Justin. Justin from Tennessee. Thank you for your question. Justin asked us how one man could kill 4 people in such a short time and no one hear it. Hey, that's a good question. And here's how I answered him. First, it was a surprise attack. Next, it is probable that they had been taken in alcohol and maybe were not as alert and their reflexes were slower. You see, that's not an attack on the victims, by the way. This is a college, and college students tend to blow off steam between glasses. Nobody is casting a doubt on the victims. The third thing I want to point out was that they were probably asleep, or at least in a doze, or at least in a sleepy condition. The next thing was he was much larger than any of those, and he had experience in boxing, which is attacking up close and in personal space. That's the answer to that. Also, there are other examples where other killers have killed in such a fashion. Just go study what that monster Ted Bundy did here in Florida at the college house near campus. Next, as we shared last time, the defense will attack the investigators themselves. You see, in the O.J. Simpson trial, they were able to zero on the prejudice of one investigator. But that was also at the time of the Rodney King episode, where white cops attacked viciously a black man. O.J. Simpson was black, and race certainly became a part of the process in the O.J. Simpson trial. Not so here, you see. And the trial of O.J. Simpson was also held in an area where there is already a lot of mistrust for law enforcement. Not so here. It is a different time, it is a different setting, and it's in a different place. And while I believe they will attack investigators, they will attempt to find any clink in the armor, I believe it simply will not impact the same way the O.J. Simpson case did. I believe, my friend, the investigators and the prosecutors will prevail. I predict that he will be found guilty. But how about you? What say ye? Do you think that Brian Koberger actually has a chance to get off of these alleged crimes? Hey, I did not think that O.J. and Casey would get off either, yet they did. What do you think? Again, I want to invite you to reach out with a shout-out. You can reach me, Charlie Crimebuster, at gmail.com, charliecrimebuster at gmail.com. Hey, if you want to support the program, go on over there to peacemakernetwork.com. There you can become a badge supporter, support the program, and nation's heroes. Hey, let me ask you also, if you have enjoyed these presentations, appreciate our material, give us a good rating on your podcast platform. If you haven't subscribed, take time to do so. We would appreciate that. You do all that and join us next week for another Charlie Crimebuster episode. And so until this time next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, be safe, be alert. Yep, for the life you save, it may be your very own.